regards, this panel will explore how climate-induced events such as floods and heat waves have compromised agriculture productivity, and it will discuss policy reforms, advocacy for resilient food systems, and adoption of sustainable agriculture practices. By examining implementation barriers, financial strategies, and the global best practices, the panel aims to identify integrated approaches to ensure year-round access to nutritious and affordable food for all Pakistanis. Key questions include the importance of revising food security policy, addressing implementation challenges, enhancing stakeholders' advocacy, and learning from successful intervention programs in building climate-resilient, adaptive food systems. With this, now I would introduce our first panelist. He's Mr. Eric Kenneth. He is the head of programs from World Food Program. He worked for the WFP's Regional Bureau for Eastern, Central, and Southern Africa. He has also worked with UNICEF and WHO in Cambodia, Myanmar, Nepal, Rome, Africa, Central Asia, and Middle East. Mr. Eric has also spent time in Afghanistan and was part of the first assessment team along with the CDC. So may I request Mr. Eric for his opening remarks. May I please display his presentation?
Good afternoon. I guess it's still afternoon. Anyways, good to see all of you here. And it's really my pleasure to be here on behalf of WFP and to also welcome as co-leads to the event, everybody here. And thank you to SDPI for all of their work and for taking the lead in this event, which is very important. And also working in a very interesting topic of transforming the food systems, especially in the Pakistan context where we are hit with so many natural crises. So how do we help to build and sustain resilient food systems in the context of Pakistan? So that's our topic for today. And I've been asked to talk a little bit about the Pakistan context and then some of the work WFP is doing globally in resilient food systems work. So we all know that in Pakistan, agriculture is very important. It sustains the lives and livelihoods for so many people in the country and is primarily one of the largest employers in the country. You have one of the largest productions, you're one of the larger producers of wheat, rice, cotton, maize around the world. And so that's quite important that we make sure that these food systems are be able to withstand the various climatic shocks as they become more intense and more frequent, and also in new areas of the country. The food system is being drastically impacted. One of the messages we'd like to really make is that these record-breaking heat waves and floods have disrupted the food system, destroyed the livelihoods, and significantly increased the need for assistance. Climatic shocks often intensify existing crises, such as conflicts and economic instability, and further stretching an already overwhelmed system. The floods of 2022, for example, there were almost $15 billion in economic losses as a result of the floods. The loss of livestock, land, and agricultural production was enormous. And then, of course, there was displacement, which also disrupted a lot more than just the agricultural system, but also the livelihoods of the people that were displaced. The heat waves and the new water scarcity issues, which are coming more frequently, also decrease agricultural yields by up to 6%, and the productivity as well is decreased by around 8 to 10% by 2040. This will eventually lead to increased food prices, affecting household food insecurity across the country. These impacts of some of the main drivers of food insecurity in the country include, let's go to the SOFI report. You have almost 45% of the Pakistan population are moderately or severely food insecure, which is an increase from 14% in 2014 to 2016. So that's huge. And the prevalence of undernourishment is around 52 million people, or just almost 21% of the population. So why are we interested in food systems? In the context of these recurrent crises, we want to think about building resilience and strengthening the systems to help address these root causes of hunger. It reduces also humanitarian needs and improves the livelihoods of your population. A USAID study estimated that every dollar invested in resilience saves up to $3 in humanitarian emergencies response. So not only are we investing in the systems to be resilient, but also when there is a crisis, we're trying to reduce the cost of the crisis or responding to that crisis. So I wanted to show this first slide. We're using a definition of resilient food systems that we have in WFP. It's defined to the food system is resilient if it has the capacity to provide enough safe and affordable food and healthy diets to all, even in the face of structural vulnerabilities, shocks, or stressors. So that's a pretty tall order. But I think it's really important to kind of keep, eyes on the definition and understand that throughout crises, this is very important that the resilience is built. Otherwise, they can collapse. And of course, the rebuilding of the systems is cost even more. But in order to develop the resilient food system, we have to understand a few things. One is that we have to understand the food journey, that influencing factors, the relationships between the actors, and the trade-offs in a certain context. So it's not really a linear pathway. There are a lot of different moving parts that we need to understand before we intervene to try to strengthen and make the system more resilient. One of the ways to do that then is to strengthen the capacity to absorb, adapt, and transform livelihoods and systems in the face of these shocks or stressors. Next slide, please. So then there's a framework to resilient food systems. There are a few points that I'd like to make on that in order to build resilient food systems, we really need to be context specific. So it's not like one size fits all. You take it and apply it the same way everywhere in every system in every country. We really need to understand the context. The second one is that it involves partnerships. And it's a great example here today to see so many different partners and players involved in this effort to try to understand and then to build the resilient food systems. And then it requires layered, integrated, and sequenced activities. And lastly, that needs to be then scaled up. So you start, layer it, and then scale. So there are 5 program pathways we look at that are tailored to the context and combined at national, subnational, or local levels to reinforce programming and synergies and impact. The first pathway is about protecting food systems and food consumption before, during, and immediately after the crisis. The second pathway would be restoring the natural resource base and supporting climate-resistant, resilient local food production. And then the third pathway was linking production and value chain activities to food consumption. A fourth one would be influencing the food environments and the consumption of healthy diets. And so the fifth one would be supporting an enabling environment for resilient food systems. So within WFP in Pakistan, we're really working on pathway 3, 4, and 5. So the linking production and value chain activities. And then I think the one on influencing food environments and consumption of healthy diets, and then supporting the enabling environment for resilient food systems, such as supporting the policy reform with the provincial governments and, of course, the UNFSS advocacy. In conclusion, I'd like to reinforce the fact that Pakistan has enormous potential to build more resilient food systems. We've already signed the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021, and commitment to achieve food system targets through 5 action tracks. PARC has established for the subnational food systems dashboard to track indicators at district level. And then there are these national policy dialogues. But more work needs to be done to review the existing policies, to match commitments to a resilient food system, to increase implementation practices outlined in these policies, and build evidence generation for tracking progress and continued upward advocacy. Thank you very much, and look forward to an interesting dialogue.
Thank you so much. Is it working? Please check it. Okay. Thank you so much, Eric, for your presentation on WFP's framework to resilient food system. And I do agree with you that Pakistan has potential to achieve food resilience. But for that, we need to understand, as Eric said, first we need to understand the food journey and then the influencing factors and relationship between actors. And I guess, as you said, that strengthening capacity to transform a livelihood is equally important along with the partnerships. So with this, we move toward our next speaker. She is Mr. Alicia Katrina from WFP Food Systems Coordination Unit. She is the chief of the unit, and she has assumed this role under the Strategic Coordination Unit within the Program Operation Department. The Food Systems Coordination Unit will support WFP's external positioning and foster internal integration, coordination, and coherence of WFP's work along the different component of food systems chain. May I request Ms. Alisa for her keynote remarks?
Good afternoon. I'm hoping you can hear me. Hello?
Yeah, you are audible, Sui.
Okay, thank you. I hope the connectivity stands. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm happy to bring these remarks to this important conference and to this important gathering. So briefly, what have we heard so far? We have heard how much Pakistani economy is reliant and dependent on agriculture, being also the 8th largest producer of wheat. And also we heard how much Pakistan is exposed to vulnerability and to climate change, and has witnessed, in fact, recently some important floods. In fact, Pakistan is also the 8th most vulnerable country to climate change. So just thinking about these two characteristics makes it really imperative to invest in making food systems more resilient and adaptable to climate change so that they can withstand the shocks while also preserving livelihoods and the natural resources on which these livelihoods depend. So how can we enhance advocacy for more investment in resilient food systems? Typically, we would consider these steps. The first very important point is to raise awareness of policymakers and governments at the highest level on the impact of climate change on food insecurity, using reputable sources of data and evidence. And just to cite one, last year in 2023, SDPI and WFP issued a report on the impacts of climate change on food and nutrition security in Pakistan, which is partly also informing this discussion. The second point would be to consider promoting the convergence of these two important agendas, the food system transformation agenda and the climate actions and climate adaptation agendas, through what we call a convergence initiative. And I'll be speaking very briefly about this initiative. You also may want to identify successful integrated programs that strengthen the food systems while also addressing and mitigating climate impacts on vulnerable populations. And finally, you may want to promote some exchange visits or South-South cooperation to learn from these interventions. So what is Pakistan? We have heard that Pakistan adhered to the UN Food System Summit commitments and developed national pathways for food system transformation. Pakistan also has national adaptation plan and a nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement. So it has all the policy and strategies in place. What would be required is for government leadership at the highest level to bring stakeholders together to identify areas of convergence and synergies between these two agendas. And typically, this would be done by a government institution or an entity that sits perhaps at the president or prime minister office, depending on the country, or something like the National Planning Commission, who has convening power and can bring together the different line ministries. So what is the conversion initiative in detail? It's an initiative that supports national efforts to advance the alignment between the food system transformation and the climate action agendas. And it was launched last year at COP28. And the FAO, the Food Systems Hub, which is sitting at FAO, is responsible for supporting the countries to undertake this convergence initiative, just the same way as the hub is supporting the national conveners in countries to develop the national pathways. And it consists in reviewing these policies in place, in these strategies in each country to identify the areas of synergies, and then also to update the policies. For example, if you have the national pathway, you may want to consider to review it in order to include more climate considerations, and vice versa. You may want to look at the climate strategies to integrate food systems transformation consideration more strongly. And all this is done through a consultative process through what we call a convergence group that needs to be established. So the Convergence Initiative is open, in fact, to all countries that have a national food systems convener in place and that have developed food systems transformation pathway. And this is the case in Pakistan. But also they need to agree to form a convergence group. And with this, the national convener, supported by the UN resident coordinator, reaches out to existing national focal points for climate action and biodiversity with the purpose to join this, to form this convergence group. And the process kicks off with a national inception workshop, usually facilitated by the hub. And following that national inception workshop and the establishment of the convergence group, subsequent dialogues are organized at the country level with the ultimate objectives to develop a convergence action blueprint, which is basically where you identify concrete actions and programs to advance the two agendas. And just to give a reference, in the region, Kazakhstan was the first country to launch its convergence initiative just this October 2024. And as we speak this week, it is Indonesia. They're undertaking their inception workshop for the Convergence Initiative. And Turkey is slated to do that in December 2024. So it's a very recent process that has kickstarted. Now, in the interest of time, just allow me to give one example in the region. This is Nepal. And following the Food Systems Summit in 2021, they instituted a Food Systems Steering Committee, which was already quite multi and interministerial. It had members from the different ministries. And over there, the National Planning Commission formulated a food system national strategy in order to mainstream food system consideration into the government planning processes. Now, last year in 2023, the Food System Steering Committee endorsed the concept of localization of food system, which was aligned to local level planning processes and building the capacity of municipalities. So they started a pilot, selecting 7 municipalities to pilot this localization with technical support from WFP and FAO. And these municipalities identify interventions such as home gardens, good agricultural practices, demo plots for limiting the use of chemical fertilizer, finding adaptive and alternative agriculture practices, etc., to diversify livelihoods and diets and enhance access to nutritious foods. So it is quite recent, but the municipalities realized the importance of supporting their local food systems transformation with joint initiatives at the local level. So this process could also be interesting to follow in the light of a convergence initiative when looking at the same time at strengthening the local food system, but also identify interventions that may limit or the impact of climate change on the vulnerable communities. So let me stop here. In the interest of time, thank you very much. I hope the outcome was good.
No doubt you are right that Pakistan is the 8th most vulnerable country. And I also agree with you that investment to make food systems resilient and adaptive to climate change is quite important. And you have raised, as you said very well, that we need to enhance advocacy by raising awareness of policymakers and government. food insecurity and climate change nexus. And we also need to identify convergence and synergies of food system transformation and climate adaptation agendas. And thank you for highlighting countries who have recently launched convergence initiative. Thank you so much with this. Now, for this session, we have two presentations, and we would move toward our first presenter. He's Mr. Talal Hakim, Regional Regulatory Team Leader, APAC, and Country Manager at Corteva AgriScience. Over his tenure at Corteva, he has held strategic roles, including APAC, Zonal Regulatory Leader, and Country Leader for Pakistan, advancing through various regulatory and stewardship positions covering regions like Pakistan, Bangladesh since 2020. Prior to joining Corteva, he spent nearly a decade at a number of places. His career foundation in corporate and regulatory affairs include role at Bet.com, and Cigarette Manufacturer Association, and the National Accountability Bureau, following on an initial position as commercial executive at OGDCL. Talal, but I would request you to keep your presentation brief, as our agenda is tight packed. So please keep it brief. You have just 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Talal, as it was introduced. So can you play the presentation, or should I share my slides?
I guess you may share your presentation. Umair, please give him rights. Talal, you have the rights. Please share your presentation.
Yeah. Let me know if you can. Right, my topic for today is challenges for food security in Pakistan, and this is a very hot topic and very pertinent to our discussion and the agenda of this overall seminars. So, I'm just give you brief perspective. What is food security? Usually, we think that it's about giving access of food to everyone, but I think it's much more than that. It's not only the food availability, but the nutritious food available to all people for their healthy life. So that's what we should consider the food security definition, not just the food, but the nutritious food. And when we talk about the dimension of food security, so there are different as dimension, but three key would be the availability. How do we bring that food? Do we do the local production, or if we don't do it, then we import that? And then the accessibility. How do we get that to our people in the country? And then affordability. Would it be easily affordable, or will have to give subsidies? The government will have to give subsidies for people to get access to that. So it's all about these three: available, accessible, and affordable. And food is basically coming primarily through agriculture. And when we look at the agricultural landscape of Pakistan, and you would know that we are a major agriculture country, and then we've got crops which are, I'll say, the top 10 in the world. And then we've got a very vibrant and growing poultry and livestock industry. So it's really phenomenal to see the agriculture, but how is it really helping us to actually meet the food and the feed demands of folks and the livestock? If we look at the crop production trends, and so there have been significant growth in crops over the past couple of decades. And if we look at the food crops, the main crops which have grown in past few years would be, although it will be wheat, maize, rice, but this significant growth would be coming from maize. While wheat and rice are kind of a staple food, but the maize is something which is really helping us in our food and feed security perspective, because this is something which is not only used as a flour, but it's helping us to get the protein requirements from poultry as well as from the dairy. So this is something where the growth of maize has significantly contributed to the development of poultry as well as the dairies in Pakistan. When we talk about some of the food security challenge, the population growth is expected to double. The agricultural growth is not that significantly growing. And when we talk about the agricultural land we have, that is being reduced through urbanization. And another aspect is that food crops are being replaced with the cash crops, and the opportunities whenever they are available gets huge attraction from our growers, and that leads to the reduction in the cultivation food crops. And then the overall climate change and the something which is really impacting on in the cropping patterns as well as the crop productivity. So these are few food security challenges that we are facing, and I think this is really significant, which we really need to consider whenever we are talking about or food security perspectives. Then there is the studies also mentioned that there is significant food security existing within Pakistan, and the latest survey which I could find was in 2018, where it was mentioned that around 37% population is expected to be food insecure. So there can be a lot of options to mitigate these food security challenges. And one of the options that I will share today through my talk is the biotechnology adoption in agriculture. And this is one tool which can really enhance the productivity of our growers and can also really help in terms of improving our environmental impacts that we are having right now on our crops. And Pakistani farmers have really been receptive to these biotech crops. We look at the cotton adoption to the BT cotton, that's been significant, although there have been other challenges, but the opportunity for productivity growth has been there. And these opportunities are available in other crops than cotton, like maize, like soybeans, and a few other crops which are being developed locally. And when we talk about the contribution of biotechnology globally, it's been significant since their introduction.
Sorry to intervene. You have just 3 minutes to wind up.
Yeah, there is just a few slides I'll quickly go through. Thanks. So there's been significant contribution of biotech crops in terms of food security through increased productivity and the overall environmental impact, which has been positive through reduced use of crop protection or pesticides, and then biodiversity through plowing or cultivation developments. And then that's really helped us to alleviate the poverty and hunger in the world. So this has been a great contribution for last few years since their introduction. And it's not something which is not being adopted by the world. There are countries who are adopting it very quickly. And since inception, there are 29 countries until 2019 who have adopted, and they are growing. And their farmers are getting the benefit of this, not only them, but also the population through increased and the cheaper food available to them. And this is something which is extremely safe, have a proven safety record. The regulatory conditions or the regulatory systems are
Talal, sorry, you can't hear.
In place, not only international level, but it can really help us to grow and increase our productivity at a lesser cost with a better environmental impact. And I think one of the most important thing that I want to highlight, that the way our population is increasing, we need, and the agricultural land is kind of decreasing. We really need to produce more with whatever we have. So, and this tool can really help us to meet that demand in the future. So that.
Thank you so much, Talal. Indeed, biotechnology.
That's all from my side. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Talal. Indeed, biotechnology is improving world's agriculture. So with this, I'm really glad to announce that along with the experts, we have a representative from youth, and I really encourage their participation as youth always come with the novel ideas and approaches. So we have Mr. Mohammad Osama. He is currently pursuing electrical engineering at Namal University, Miawali, and he would present on solar-powered hydroponic farming, a pathway to sustainable agriculture. Osama, you may come on podium. Yeah. Okay. Umair, please display his presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mohammad Osama from Namal University, Miawali. And today I will be giving my side of view on solar-powered hydroponic farming, a pathway to sustainable agriculture. As many of our fellows have very briefly and very beautifully covered, specifically Sir Eric, that we have lots of calamities in Pakistan, including heat waves, water issues, and specifically floods. So these all things need to be catered. And for that thing, we, along with my friends and co-authors, we have written a conference paper, which will be lately going for the publication for journal as well. And that is the same title, Solar-Powered Hydroponic Farming, a Pathway to Sustainable Agriculture.
Next slide.
The outline of my presentation is that I will first of all introducing you to about what is basically solar-powered hydroponic farming, relevance of it to mitigating food security challenges, which is actually the crux of today's conference, and the stakeholder identification, comprehensive guide to best practices, feasibility of hydroponics in Pakistan, and synopsis of Pakistan's agriculture sector. First of all, we are very naive to the term, but it's basically hydroponics. As Dr. Tariq, who is Dean of Agriculture in Arid University, he will duly verify that hydroponics is a sort of technique by which we reduce the use of land, and we, in panels or in channels specifically, with water nutrients, we grow plants, different plants, which are feasible for the, nutrition as well. Plus, moreover, they are very productive and highly, you can say, handy for us to cultivate again and again. What are the challenges we face in traditional farming? They include water scarcity, as Dr. Eric mentioned earlier. Moreover, soil erosion, lots of floods, recent floods, and before that floods that erode all over. We have nutrition land, and all nutrients are flown away with the water. So moreover, climate changes and extreme weathers, they are of course not so feasible for Pakistani environment that we can, grow the plants again and again because of that harsh conditions, which results in low productivity. And most importantly, the urbanization, which is these days, we see different societies are building up again and again. So these societies these urbanization is actually taking up the space for, you can say, better farming or better agriculture things. Rural infrastructure, or you can say the backward knowledge of people who are not so well aware of this thing of hydroponic or any new farming side things. Limited storage and warehouses. We have recently faced this issues as well, that we had lots of wheat, but we did not have place to store. Then what happens that mice eats that, wheat or whatsoever we have grains. Ineffective agriculture policies, which is very crucial, as Ma'am Alicia De Katrina also mentioned, that policies need to be mentioned again and again and need to be highlighted specifically. Pest and disease management, there are floods. If there are floods, then they will result in more productivity of pests, pesticides, insects, which will eventually, eventually they will affect our crops and their growth as well. Vulnerability to natural disasters, as mentioned, floods and different other disasters. What is solar power hydroponics mitigating food security challenges we are facing? Food security challenges, improved crop quality and nutrition value, which increased yield year-round production. How is that possible? We see that we have two pieces of crop production level. One is our land, and one is a hydroponic system. In that land, we have zillions of issues which I listed before. But in hydroponic system, a controlled system where we have better, you can say, opportunity of catering our catering our crop. It will be much more better in productivity, in nutrition. Secondly, water conservation. Of course, it uses less, rather very less amount of water with respect to normal agriculture, because we can recycle our water again and again. Energy independence. Yes, we can convert our whole hydroponic system to energy independent sources like solar or wind or any specific, but here I will highlight solar, and it is according to SDGs number 7 as well, that is clean and affordable energy. Climate resilience, since there is no outside, you can say, interferences in our climate, so we can say that in controlled environment, better yield and better productivity is more, welcomed. Economic empowerment, if there will be more yield, subsequently there will be more, farmers, or their farmers, and their income will be also increasing. Plus, talking about Pakistan specifically, if its yield is increasing in productive way and without any losses, I will mention how specifically we are facing losses by a comparison chart. So that will subsequently add into the economy of Pakistan. Social benefits includes enhanced food accessibility and affordability with improved health outcomes. Since these things are very nutritious and these are very much better than local or normal, you can say, agriculture products. So subsequently, they are better in health perspective as well. These are the stakeholders, which include farmers, local communities, government agencies, private sector investors who can, show their, you can say that they can show their, interest in this thing. Moreover, research institutes as hydroponic system in Arid University or Agriculture University, Faisalabad, suppliers and consumers, the people who, you can say, export this thing, or we the consumers, policymakers and regulators. And what are the engagement strategies? We can collaboratively make decision making, both the parties or both the peoples together. Capacity building and training, we can introduce training and different workshops for the people, so they might know what actually this thing is and how to perform this in a proper way. Joint research development, consultation and workshop for farmers, for local people, for international, national people. As Ms. Alicia also mentioned, that there should be promoting of exchange visits too. So this thing also, we can have different ideas as United States and other different countries, for example, Canada or Scandinavian countries are very good producer in this domain. We can have exchange programs with them, so they can guide us, or they can, you can say, supervise us to do or implement this thing in Pakistan. Some of the fruits and vegetables, lettuce, spinach, kale, and Swiss chard, tomatoes, all kind of tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, and root vegetables include potatoes, onions, beetroots, carrots. Fruits include strawberry and blueberries. These all fruits and vegetables are very handy, and they're very nutritious and very, okay, here I want to take a moment to tell you one thing. For example, there is a flood situation and I have a piece of land, and the productivity at that space is...
Sama, I'm afraid we have limited time. Please keep it short. Please.
So, okay, let's move forward. So this is an overview of market, that estimated market size of hydroponics in USD is 16.6 billion in 2027 across the globe. And right now it is 8.1 in 2020. And America is the highest constituent of 40%. Moreover, Pakistani agriculture sector has 24% in GDP and employs 36.43% of labor force. But we can do better, and till 2023, 1.9% annual increase in population demands more and more food as well. Market size, 30 to 50% growth will be introduced with the hydroponic system, and income will be increased by 20 times. Moreover, Pakistani diverse climate needs something which is very unified for every sector. It could be in Gwadar, Pakistan, Lahore, in Karachi, everywhere these systems can be, equipped well. These are some comparison. 4 in normal and 70 tons. See a huge difference of tomatoes only: cucumber, cherry tomatoes, capsicum, etc. So what are the recommendations by us authors? That national guidelines should be properly, as Ms. Alicia also said, and Sir Eric also highlighted, that guidelines should be specifically nominated and told. Subsidized research and development programs, collaborative platforms, engagement communities, tax reform specifically, because these things are bit costly. Subsidies for farmers specifically, if tractors are given, these systems should also be introduced in their, you can say, budgets. Encouragement of local investments, or local people who are interested to show their zeal and zest for this thing particularly. Educational workshop for people like me, for people like you. Awareness campaigns via social media, by print media. There should be some pilot projects, which is actually launched in, as I mentioned, in ARID and University of Faisalabad too. Moreover, again, it is a game changer thing, because it actually changed the dynamics of agriculture in normal agriculture of Pakistan. It is something that is against the tradition, but it is innovative thing. Again, going with SDG number 9, that is infrastructure and building up the industries. We have key advantages of high crop yield, significant waters, healthy and nutrition produce. We do face climate changes, which all with these key awareness points, we can subsequently get better in these things. And our vision is once people see this benefit, they'll be more likely to adopt these climate-friendly farming practices. We have special thanks to SDPI, our faculty members, our listeners, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Osama. Thank you so much, Osama, for a wonderful presentation. And luckily, we have an expert from academia, and he's expert of hydroponic, Dr. Tariq Mukhtar, Dean Faculty of Agriculture. So you may take this mic. Okay. He would speak on leveraging biotechnology for climate resilient rise to combat climate change. But before this, sir, I would request you to give two-liner review on both presentations. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. First of all, I am thankful to SDPI for inviting me, providing me the opportunity to speak before you on the topic leveraging biotechnology for climate resilient rise to combat climate change. Before my talk, I will briefly give you an overview of the two talks. The first presented by Talal Hakim. He talked about role of biotechnology in agriculture. What is its role? How can this technology be adopted in climate resilient agriculture? He also talked about different cropping patterns. How can we ensure food security? And next, Mr. Muhammad Talha, he talked about hydroponic, solar-powered hydroponic technique. You know that hydroponic technique is gaining popularity in Pakistan. In hydroponic, we can obtain several times higher yield as compared to the conventional method of cultivation. So he talked about on different aspects of hydroponic, what crops can be grown, what vegetables can be grown in hydroponic, because hydroponic is controlled, it is in controlled conditions. So we can make the crops free from diseases, pests. Mostly these crops are organic. So their talks, presentations were very nice and beautiful and very informative. Now coming to my talk, leveraging biotechnology for climate resilient rise to combat climate. As you know that half of the global population uses rice as their staple food. Climate change has begun to affect food security worldwide, and rice crop is also under threat by climate change. What is impact of climate specifically in agriculture point of view? I will talk on, I will restrict my talk to rice. Pakistan is one of the most affected country by climate change. How climate change affects agriculture? rice crop. There are extreme temperatures. We have witnessed during the last few years extreme erratic temperatures. I still remember that during the last year, there was a heat wave during February in wheat crop. So it affected grain formation of wheat crop and resulted in lower yields. Then we witnessed erratic rainfall patterns. The rainfall patterns have totally changed. Sometimes we have heavy rains, and sometimes we face drought conditions. So these erratic rainfalls, they greatly affect rice crop. Then another impact of climate change is salinization of soil, because there is accumulation of salts in our soils, especially in farmland areas, coastal areas where rice is grown. So saline water intrusion into these farmlands, so they pose a significant challenges. Then we have seen unpredicted outbreaks in pests and diseases, because pests and diseases, they are directly correlated with environmental factors. If there is humidity, increase in humidity, many diseases, they appear in epidemic forms. So similarly, many insects, they also flourish, and they appear in epidemics when the environmental conditions are conducive. So environment is greatly affecting our crops. Many minor diseases now have become major threat to agriculture, especially in rice crops. How can we overcome these issues? So there are biotechnological approaches, though we are using conventional methods which are long-lasting, but the use of biotechnological tools for climate resilience. So there are different techniques, genetic engineering and CRISPR technology. This is the latest technology, very informative. You can obtain results in shorter times than by using marker-assisted selections, genomics and transcriptomes, resilience against salinity, and developing pest and disease resilience. Thanks. Genetic engineering. So genetic engineering, it is a key biotechnical approach. It is very faster and more accurate. We have some success stories because using these techniques, genetic engineering and CRISPR technology, submergence tolerant varieties have been developed. And these varieties can withstand under stress water conditions. When flooding conditions are there, so these varieties can survive up to 2 to 3 weeks. Then drought tolerant varieties have been developed because sometimes there is a acute shortage of water. The researchers have developed varieties which can withstand extreme drought conditions. The next very important technology is marker-assisted selection. Marker-assisted selection involves identifying genetic markers linked to desirable traits in rice crops for use in breeding programs. So they have very benefits. We can identify desirable traits in crops, and these traits can be inserted in rice crops. Then these can be used for selection breeding. And next is genomics and transcriptomes. Genomics helps scientists understand complex interaction between the rice plant's genome and the environment. By identifying genes involved in stress responses, researchers have created maps of how rice plants react under conditions like high salinity or heat stresses. On the other hand, transcriptomics in which we can study the role of RNA molecules that guide protein in cells, helps scientists understand how plant responds to molecular level under different stresses. So these insights are essential, identifying, and amplifying genes that help rice withstand environmental conditions. Then very most important, developing pest and disease resistance. We have seen frequent outbreaks of diseases and pests. When the climate conditions are favorable, the disease, they appear in epidemic forms. Just we have seen epidemics in wheat crop. The rust has devastated the whole crop. Similarly, rice crop is also badly affected by diseases and by the outbreak of these insects. So by using RNA interference, we can target the genes which insects or pathogens used to develop disease in pathogenesis. So by targeting these genes, the insects or the pathogens are unable to attack the crops. Then resilience against salinity. You know that salinity is one of the major issues of our soils. Most of the soils are saline. So by using these technology, we can breed salt tolerant varieties. So we can grow those varieties in areas where salt is a major issue. So I will give you some success stories which have, by using these technologies, some of the issues have been overcome. So one is the Thailand's rice breeding program. So they collaborated with an organization, Biotech, and Cassette Sword University. They collaboratively started a project to work on different stress in rice crops. So they successfully developed heat tolerance varieties and pest resistant varieties, which can respond to these stresses. Next. Then in India, they have successfully developed climate resilient varieties which can withstand different stresses, drought stress, submergence stress, diseases and pests. Next. In Pakistan, the initiative has also been taken in NARC. NIGAB is an institute which is working on development of rice varieties which are resistant to these stresses using biotechnological tools. Similarly, NIAB and NIBG, they are also working on developing varieties which are climate resilient and they can withstand these stresses. So benefits of climate resilient rice through technology.
Dr. Tariq Saab, sorry to intervene.
Yes,
Your
we
presentation
can
is quite interesting, but
enhance food security, reduce in pesticide use, improve livelihood of farmers. Then we can environment these static technologies, they are environmentally sustainable. Yes, madam, I'm going to finish. So in the conclusion, biotechnology has immense potential to combat climate effects of changes on rice production. Genetic engineering, CRISPR, marker-assisted selection, and more can create climate resilient rice varieties. These innovations enable rice to withstand extreme weather, use resources efficiently, and assist pests and diseases. It is crucial to ensure benefits reach farmers and communities most affected by climate change. Lastly, collaboration between scientists, policymakers, farmers, and the public sector is essential. Together, we can achieve a more food secure and climate resilient future. Thank you very much.
sir, thank you so much for enhancing our knowledge on genetics engineering and genomics and other test technologies. And thank you for sharing the successful initiative of Thailand, India, and Pakistan. With this, now we move toward Ms. Florence. She's the country rep in Pakistan. Before that, she served as country rep in Morocco and Malawi. But I would request Ms. Florence for her intake on gender perspective of food systems transformation.
Assalamu alaikum. So I want to start by giving you two publications that FAO released recently and which are related to the subject of today. One is the gender country assessment. So it's a woman in agriculture in Pakistan. I think it's you'll find on the web, but it has been published very recently. And the other one is about the health issues that women in agriculture and the risk that women in agriculture in Pakistan are facing. So that apart, I'm going to speak, I've got 5 points which are related to these two publications and a bit beyond. So the first one is related to this publication, which basically is saying Pakistan, recognizing that Pakistan has a huge variety of situations regarding women in agriculture. So we cannot generalize. We cannot say, you know, there is a blueprint for Balochistan, Sindh, Punjab, KP, etc. That's one. However, there is a common pattern. There are common patterns. So while you will find in this publication the differences between the different regions from a cultural point of view, from a social norm point of view, from an agriculture point of view, we have highlighted common patterns. And these common patterns can be summarized in one very short sentence, is that the women have less access than men to inputs, credit, knowledge, and land. So the half glass empty of that is that when I did my master degree in England 35 years ago, these things, I learned these things already. You know, these were the things that the professors were telling me. So, but let's be positive and let's look at the half glass full. So the second part is 2 entry points that I would like to raise or to propose to you as potential leverage for changing that situation. One is the economic empowerment of women. And I want to give you the example of my own country, France. You know, when I was a kid, I come from a farm family background. And when I was a kid, I was in the field during my summer holidays to help with the maize picking, etc., harvesting, etc. And at that time, my grandmother was working in the farm, but not recognized, not paid. Today, so 2 generations down the line, my cousin has taken the farm, and both of them, so she is the farmer and the husband is an employee somewhere else. So basically the evolution is from 1 salary to 2 salaries from the farm. And that's the way they cope, because agriculture is so risky that they need these 2 income. So the economic empowerment, you know, it's a different economic empowerment in the sense that the farmer is my cousin, is not, you know, her husband. But the thing to me is the possibility to go off farm for the woman as well to get an income. So this is one thing which is so important, because here in Pakistan, 70% of the working force, women working force, work in the agriculture sector and is not paid, is not recognized. Okay? So the second entry point in which I really believe is the digitalization. Why? Because we had done in Morocco, where I was before, we had done a very thorough assessment of the potential of digitalization in economic empowerment of women. And when you look, in this country, when we looked at the woman access to a smartphone, which they had, not directly, but in the family, because there was one and they could access it, they were using it a lot for things which are mother related, you know, kitchen, cooking recipes amongst the community, health issue about it. So the potential of using that for the agriculture sector can be huge, but it needs digital literacy. And we don't do a lot of digital literacy for women, especially, you know, farming women who are illiterate and need special tools because they don't have access to our big smartphone, but they have access to the basic WhatsApp, etc. Okay? So that's the second thing which I believe could make a difference in the role of women in agriculture and could bring a big leap in the development of the sector. My fourth point is I'm putting out my FAO hat. It's my personal belief is the crucial role of mother and father in the education of their girls compared to the education of their son. And I will give you the example. I did speak to a university medical, I don't remember where exactly, but in Islamabad, about medical subject. And in the crowd, there were students, and more than half of them were women. However, the dean was saying, unfortunately, we don't have any medical doctors, women. They all graduate, but they drop. Why? Because the education is telling them that they should then, you know, once they get married, take care of the children and all that. So this is an education issue to me. And I'm sure if you look at your neighbors, your friends, your, you know, surrounding, and if you look at the families which have not done difference between men, between the daughter and the son, and the one who have done, I'm sure the daughter have a different pathway in the future, in their future life than the daughter. So my plea, because I'm sure most of you are mother or father, my plea is education is a big leverage to make a change. Then my last point is about the UN. It's a very UN now thing. It's about the UN Secretary General has announced at the General Assembly last September the importance of financing for these SDGs. So basically, the amount of money that is in the world is huge. If we could trigger some of it towards the achievement of the SDG, it would make a big difference. And for that, the Secretary General has identified 6 pathways, which are pathways which can make a difference on these SDG achievements, and one of which is on the food system transformation because of the interconnection with many SDGs and because of the broad, you know, it's not agriculture only, it's the whole from farm to fork. So Pakistan is going to work on that. And so we will push, I mean, within the UN system, our resident coordinator is engaged in moving this food system transformation pathway forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Florence, for talking on, for sharing your gender perspective. Gender is something which is close to my heart, and I completely agree with you on a lot of things. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, where women only serve as unpaid workers, though there are a large proportion of women who are working in field, but they are recognized as unpaid worker. And I do agree with you that access and ownerships are the major issues. And for that, the only way forward is economic employment, and for that, education along with the awareness is quite important. So with this, we move toward our next speaker, Mr. Arjun Dihan. He's Senior Program Specialist at International Development Research Center. And I would request him to present on financing needs in food and agriculture to meet climatic challenges.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really sorry I can't be there, but much enjoying the session. So much rich information on such an important topic. And I think the previous Ms. Roll's comment on financing provides a great segue to what I want to focus on. First of all, to say what and this is where my contribution is based on is I work at IDRC as the chair mentioned, which is a research program on climate adaptation and resilience, which is funded by the UK International Development Agency (FCDO) and implemented by IDRC, and I'm based in Delhi. And this is a large research program across Asia and Africa. Unfortunately, not enough work in Pakistan, and I hope in future we will connect more to SDPI to build collaboration out of there. And that's currently has some 65 research partnerships. We work with over 130 research organizations across the global south, and 3/4 of the research partners are based in the global south, which of course is IDRC's mandate. So the two main themes are indeed the food system challenge in the region, how and why climate change compounds this. I don't think I have much to add to what previous speakers said, so I'll do it very quickly, and I really focus on the needs and shortfalls of finance and the need for new old metals, as I said, that connect very nicely to the comments that Ms. Roll made about this. And again, particularly the latter one is our early findings from the research programs, including from a conference that we organized just a month ago in Nepal. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is what other people have mentioned this as well, but I just want to underline how in a global picture, the South Asia, my outreach is across the region, and like I said, not focused on Pakistan, but it's important to say there's a regional picture there. The food security, nutrition indicators in the region are really continue to be very worrisome. And on the next slide, I list my understanding of what the major challenges are that cause those indicators. So if you move to the next slide, please. Of course, agriculture employs 40% of the labor, about 40% of the labor force in Pakistan, which is perhaps a good thing, but of course, and this provide major source of subsistence and livelihoods for the population. But the sector, of course, is marked by low productivity, by suboptimal crop yields, and part of that is because of the role of small farms, and I think that's really important. Also in the context of the innovations that were being discussed, small and big farms, of course, are very different dynamics. So what we see is, as others have mentioned, inefficient land use, unsustainable use of water, wastage of outputs, and weak irrigation system. Now, the key thing is that each of those factors are really compounded by climate change. And again, there's this global map that even more than the previous map shows the high vulnerability in the region. The more red you see on the map, the higher the vulnerability is. And as some people mentioned, Pakistan is the world's 7th, most vulnerable countries by some indicators, and that is really very, very serious to be in that rank. So on the next slide, if you move to the next slide, please. First to say, so what are the components of that climate change? And others have mentioned it. There's global warming. Warming is in the region is above the global mean, and that too is regionally different, of course. For mountainous areas, there's a decrease of snow and ice, which is completely changing both the highland and the downstream conditions. Heat waves were mentioned, long hot spells. Changes in rain patterns are really important, and of course, in Pakistan, better than anybody else, the huge disasters and the enormous floods and landslides that you've seen. And these are then. Can you just go back to the previous slide, please? That went a little bit too far, or I spoke too slowly. Thank you. Thanks. So what do these changes mean? And here the point really is that this is not a separate thing, but it compounds the structural challenges that exist. So this decreases these risks, these changes, risk to decrease the crop yield in many parts of the region, of course, putting people at risk of hunger. And this goes through reduced moisture of the soil, transpiration, that all may increase degradation, desertification, and as we mentioned earlier, the lack of irrigation. And again, probably particularly small farms are most impacted by this, at least able to adapt. Nobody's mentioned, I think, but in some parts of the region, out-migration due to climate change, of course, is an important factor, leaving a shortage of labor, particularly at the times when this is most needed. But just to say that climate change is not always all bad news, that are potentially also areas that where the change in temperature may actually expand potentials for productivity. So let me, if you can move to this next slide, please. So what are the factors that can enable needed climate action? And again, these are more insights from the recent workshop that Claire organized. So very clearly, the impacts of climate change are there. This is not something that's happening in the future, that's already there. It is impacting already vulnerable regions and already vulnerable groups. It has disproportionate impact on women in many cases. And the gaps for adaptation are growing. And I'll come back to that. So what is really important is to understand the impacts of those. And the reason that's important is that we need to, the whole world, but particularly those regions most impacted, need to prepare for the impacts. We are locked into the impacts of climate change. And responses need to, and there's a general awareness, but there's probably still more to be done to move from reaction to preparation. But to keep in mind that, as I said before, these are not new phenomena, but that the really hard issue is that they compound already structure or the constraint that already exists. The good news, of course, is that we do have approaches and technologies to manage the impacts, and we've seen at least two examples, and people have mentioned the others, and some lessons about the things that really work well. Climate action needs to be locally led. The focus needs to be in implementation. The technologies are generally, need to be adapted, but the point is really implementation, and we need to scale innovations such as the ones we saw before. The new Adaptation Gap Report coming out this week or next has very important analysis of climate analysis of climate projects, climate adaptation projects, to see what works and doesn't. And finally, then I'll spend the last few minutes on that absolutely key. Nobody's mentioned finance yet, I think. It is in short supply, and the quality of finance matters as much as the quantity. Climate finance, if you move to the next slide, please. There is at least a quadruple whammy of the climate finance shortfall. Climate finance is overall insufficient. Again, please look at the adaptation gap report that's coming out. Secondly, there is limited access to poorer and indebted country where the cost of capital is higher than elsewhere. Out of that, too little money. Most of the money goes to mitigation, energy projects, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but because of the limited financing, too little goes to adaptation, which is what poorer countries and poorer groups in those countries need most. And again, I refer to the adaptation gap report coming out. And within that, there's lots of research that shows that too little of that already limited money goes to the poorest group, goes to women, and goes to small producers. There's a recent climate policy initiative report on that. So when I said, if you move to the next slide, please, and thank you for following that. I said, like, both the quantity and quality of climate finance is important. And this is an agenda internationally and for each country. And it's very important that the entire development community focus on this, and this is not left to financial specialists alone. Of course, internationally, we need a just transition. We need a delivery on the commitments in the Paris Agreement, and that is the total money is growing, but it's not growing fast enough. And we will have a new numbers coming out of COP this week or next that will show us how much money is needed. And people that try to access the available money almost all say that the procedures to access money to implement projects are very complicated and it needs to be streamlined and simplified. There are important principles of that climate finance, which are not always followed, otherwise I would be mentioning them. The climate finance needs to align with locally led approaches. Success in adaptation is typically locally led by local groups, and partly because of that, the finance need to be flexible, it needs to be predictable, and it needs to focus on building capacity and not just projects. And these are not new questions, but becoming increasingly important. New investments need to be generated, as already said. It needs more international support. It also needs national revenue generation, and of course in Pakistan and other countries in South Asia, this is a huge challenge by itself. But we all need to, as I said, all countries need to invest more in to adapt to the impacts of climate change, and we need to mobilize. And sorry, was there a comment?
I request you to please be fit.
Yeah. I'll move to the last slide. And we need to mobilize more private capital, which I think the previous speaker also alluded to. But it's very important to think through what this means and to work on how that can be generated. There are no magic wands. There are no quick fixes in mobilizing private capital. It's not easily mobilized, and we need to strengthen ecosystems for the long-term capacity that is needed to generate the needed resources. We need to be aware of what drives private capital. That's not the same as the typical development community. They're looking for financial returns, not SDGs, although more and more companies are integrating that. So we need to be very clear about what private capital can and cannot do. And we absolutely need multiple approaches and reforms of policies, and as I said, that needs to include the entire development community. And this is a quote from one of the presenters from the Climate Policy Initiative that it really needs the lead from governments, that the private sector can and will chip in. We need philanthropic capital. an ecosystem like that is needed for that purpose. So I'll wrap up with that on the last slide. That sums up, I hope, what I said. You're very much aware of the structural constraint of the food system, but the opportunity is that there is evidence and solutions ready to scale with more focus on implementation. Climate change impacts are here and are there to stay. They compound those structural challenges, but there's a growing recognition, as we see on this panel, that adaptation is needed, and there's a growing understanding of what works, and there's also all the lessons that can inform action. And finally, of course, finance is falling far short. Both internationally and nationally, and many of the finance systems are not up to the task, but there is also growing evidence on the need for multiple approaches, for the need, what needs to be done to reform systems, and the need to build up ecosystem to generate the needed action. Again, thank you so much for inviting me. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Arjun. It was really interesting and wonderful presentation. And I personally agree with you that along with the quantity finance, quality also matters. And as you talk about the challenges, I do believe that these challenges provide us our blessing in disguise, and they provide us really good opportunities. Now we move toward our next speaker. He is Aftab Alam Khan, CEO, Resilient Future International. I would just give his brief profile. He has over 15 years of experience with different INGOs, and he worked on food-related crises and natural and man-made disasters like floods, heat waves, COVID-19, and Ukraine-Russia war. So I would request him to talk about food security and national adaptation plan. Sir, but we have limited time. Please keep your remarks brief.
Thank you very much, and congratulations SDPI for bringing all major players under one roof. I have to talk about food security and the National Adaptation Plan. I'm sure many of you have seen National Adaptation Plan, which Pakistan produced last year. This is an excellent document, and I really appreciate all the contributors. A detailed account of agriculture and food security is given. Number of plans are also given. And in terms of improvement, when I spoke to one of the very senior agriculture staff in one of the provinces, he did not know about the adaptation plan. So I think there is a greater need of coordination with the provinces who are already doing a lot of work, but I think there is a need to bring them together in terms of rollout of national adaptation plans so that we could synchronize it towards greater and more efficient research. Another point I would like to highlight is that it promotes, the National Adaptation Plan promotes research, which is excellent. Since Pakistan is facing the urgent need of climate action, I would suggest that in addition to new research, it's also important to benefit from existing research. For example, irrigation water is a problem. It's going to be a problem for many years. And there are already researches. For example, one study, I think 7-8 years back, produced by Pakistan Council of Research and Water Resources, showed that with less water, we can get greater production of rice. And that is through Ridge's method. And there are many other researches as well. And I think it's very important to look at existing research and implementing. There are other things known as well. For example, when I was in university, I have studied that Pakistan, we lose around 30% of our food after the harvest. And now it has reached up to 50 to 60%. So I think we need to take action as well. The same is the case of water, irrigation water losses, which was 30% many years back, and now it is reported up to 40%. So I think it's very, but in terms of research, we need to elevate our pitch to the new dimensions, like, for example, attribution sciences. The opportunities coming under loss and damage fund would require a lot of convincing through attribution research that these losses were made due to climate change to excess funds. Agriculture extension system, I think it's very important to modernize our agriculture extension system with trainings on climate resilient agriculture. To my knowledge, there is no proper mechanism of training agriculture extension people with climate resilient agriculture. Of course, they work according to campaign, but not a very robust training system. And then the incentivizing farmers is very important. We know that when we want to move from the conventional agriculture to climate resilient agriculture, we are basically promoting from capital intensive agriculture to knowledge intensive agriculture. So a lot of investment farmers have to make. I think it's very important to incentivize them. Women farmers, a lot has been talked by Florence. I would like to add 1 or 2 points. We know that Pakistan is facing feminization of agriculture. For example, the Sindh agriculture policy, the current agriculture policies, it states that 40% of migration, men are migrating towards the city, which means that greater workload on women. But our extension system, is it providing the services to women farmers who are now having greater responsibilities? Studies show that for women, there are 2 major sources of information on agriculture. One is household men and second NGOs, not extension system. So I think we need to elevate that as well. And as mentioned by Florence, the major lacking areas for women like knowledge, like assets, and like capital. All these things are required for adaptive capacity if we want to build among women farmers, which are lacking. And I think the National Adaptation Plan has a lot of attention on women, but not women as a farmer. I think that needs to be improved as well. Engaging private sector is key. We know that private sector is somehow the de facto extension services in field areas. I think it's very important to incentivize them and engaging with them to shift their services toward climate resilient agriculture. And last but not the least, the coordination. I think it's very important to engage provincial agriculture, food, and other departments in terms of rolling out the National Adaptation Plan. And the existing status of National Adaptation Plan, I think it's very important to convert it into the implementation plan, which I think would really help us to reap benefit out of this plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a brief and wonderful intellectual insights. Indeed, coordination and climate resilient training, along with recognizing women as farmers, is quite important. We would take a few questions from audience, then we would request our chair, Dr. Akmal, to conclude this session. Sir, before that, I would take few questions from audience. Before conclusion, I want to take few questions audience. Okay. Please raise your hand and ask questions. Introduce yourself and yes, sir. Please.
Wayne Bartley from like, for example, support prices from wheat, from sugar. So that a whole maybe market sort of framework for agriculture also needs to take place. So how will these things all happen? Seems like too much is needed, and what has already happened, if we could, anybody who has knowledge about this, we would like to know, because it's very quiet. We don't really know what's happening.
Sir, are you asking this question to anybody specifically, or
anybody who
okay.
wishes to
we'll
answer?
take 2 more questions, and then we would request our panelists to answer. Please, any other question? Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Abdul Sar Anjum, and I'm a retired person from agriculture. It's my question to Dr. Tariq Sahab, Harvard University. That is there any chances or dangers of releasing the harmful genes from the process of biotechnology in the environment and to affect the human health? Besides, why don't we try to make few experiments in different agroecological zones with the process of enhancing of biodiversity to keep the nations safe from danger, especially the women and the children. Also, to keep the groundwater safe from fluorides, heavy metals, arsenics like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And first of all, my appreciations to SDPI for this wonderful event. And my questions revolve around multiple comments from Florence, from my colleague Eric. How much our current situation on food system transformation is informed by our food system transformation pathway that has been developed during 2021. So, how further this could be improved, our actions in future. So this is a broad question. I think Florence would be an ideal person to respond to this.
Thank you so much. Now we will take only one question. So.
Thank you. My name is Nazim Ali and USAID. I think most of the points were already Dr. Aftab. So thank you for that. I think whenever we talk about food systems, our whole discussion revolves around agriculture. But I will refer to FAO's study in the February that 82% of the households, they cannot afford healthy diet. And I think that's not solely agriculture. So maybe we should also touch upon other elements that what's going on around. And secondly, about Usama's touched upon on the agriculture policies. And just to give you a flavor, currently, and Dr. Akmal may also know that when we develop our varieties, it takes 5-6 years to reach to the farmers because of our approval processes and everything is so long that sometimes the variety becomes obsolete before it goes to the farmers. So these are a few processes I think we can work upon and to get farmers more climate resilient seeds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your worthy comments. And now we would request our panelists to answer them. Dr. Tariq.
Just talked about genes. We only take genes which are attributable, only traits, desirable traits. We take that genes, insert, then we take experiments, and the genes which is successful, we proceed for that.
May I request Florence or Eric to respond?
No, the response. He's just putting me on the spot. So in 2021, there was a lot of efforts, extremely good and substantive efforts on the food system transformation. It was for the Food System Summit. And I can say it because I was not here, so I'm not taking credit for that. And then the momentum has gone down. But for me, the opportunity today with this UN Secretary General emphasize is to bring back the work that has been done in the past. So the idea is not at all to restart from scratch, but just to build on the very good work which was done at that time. Nazim, it's for me? No.
Okay, and the last question was which was the first one. It was open to all panelists. If anyone wants to answer it, Mr. Khan, maybe you want to answer the first question, or anyone?
About IMF conditionalities. I think, as we know, that there is a certain economic system follows after the IMF agreement, which is austerity based, and it's not expansionary. I have not studied in Pakistan, but I have studied in other countries, like, for example, in Africa. Many countries who were under IMF agreement, they had restriction in spending in various public sectors. And both the workers and the beneficiaries, they, of course, reduced the benefits of the government services. And since subsidies are not allowed, I think this is a challenge. But I hope that our important players sitting here, they would work for more climate financing for Pakistan, so that there is some sort of space to provide incentives for agriculture system transformation towards greater agriculture and food resilience.
Thank you so much, sir.
Ma'am,
Now,
add one question
Yeah,
was asked
please.
to me particularly. So you are particularly concerned about the longevity of acceptance of people and the variety of food by modern techniques, isn't it so? So what was your question? Please, could you repeat?
Osama, we are running short of time.
Sure.
You may discuss it later. So now I would request our chief guest, Dr. Akmal Sadiq, and he's technical advisor at Ministry of National Food Security and Research. Before that, he served at Asian Development Bank for good 23 years, and where he retired as chief of Rural Development and Food Security Thematic Group. And he also worked with a number of INGOs, including FAO, WFP, World Bank, and many other. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you, Ma'am Khansa. Assalamu alaikum. I have a tough task of summarizing what has been presented, which I will try to do. And in the 10 minutes that I have been allocated, I will also like to share what has not been said by the presenters. And third, I would like to share my own thoughts on the process. So I have 10 minutes, Khansa? I have 10 minutes. Thank you. My expectation was that most of the time that we have allocated hour and a half, we will discuss the solutions and not discuss what the problems are, which are very well understood. But we have ended up spending quite a bit of time discussing what are the issues and what are their different aspects. My concern as a student of agriculture or its transformation, as well as now my current position as advisor in the Ministry of National Food Security, is what exactly we need to do and where does Pakistan stand? Those are the questions to be answered. And let me share with you a few points. I will discuss, is Pakistan ready for climate change? What are the technologies we have discussed for crops, for water management, which is my sort of expertise that I spent so many years in ADB working on. And we talked about some of the interventions like hydroponics. And I will have a perspective on this. And what I missed hearing was about the best international practices which Pakistan could adopt. So let me talk first off Is Pakistan ready for climate change? And the answer is emphatic no. Pakistan's agriculture was in fair bit of crisis even before climate change appeared on horizon a few years ago. And as you know, in the last 10, 15 years, both the common folks and policymakers have gone back and forth whether climate change is real, when it's going to come about. But in Pakistan, we have seen just in the last 3-4 years, very clear events. The floods in 22, the heat wave, we clearly know there is something amiss. So therefore, we need to prepare for it. And some of the easy answers are, we talked about, we have to have climate resilience, crop varieties. We don't need to talk about in forums like this, what is the science behind it? What we want to know is, where are those climate resilient crop varieties? And which countries have adopted those? And what is the empirical evidence? Are they going to withstand the heat wave? Are they going to survive 50%, 70%, 20% after submergence for 10 days, 15 days? So I think science is still far behind the curve. And in Pakistan, we are much farther behind other countries. You mentioned, sir, about Thailand, India, and Indonesia, not to discuss developed countries. The other sad truth is that Pakistan has contributed very little to climate change, not even 1%. And yet we are among the top 10 most vulnerable countries. And that brings me to the question of financing. And Pakistan, unfortunately, for the last few years is going through a very serious macroeconomic crisis. There is no fiscal space for the government to offer any reasonable financing for research and development or helping farmers deal with the climate change issues. But on the other hand, there is a lot of money in the international organizations. And unfortunately, Pakistan doesn't even have a capacity to tap into those funds. And I haven't seen really any serious efforts made by the international organizations or even our own ministries how to take advantage of those financing opportunities. So we are in a real difficult situation. I already mentioned the technology part, which is about crops. And I have been asking my own colleagues in the ministry and in the provinces, where do we stand? And they keep promising me that these varieties are in the pipeline. So we have to see when they come out, and it's going to take many years. One of the participants asked how long it takes to even provide approval. In fact, to be honest, we have fast-tracked the varietal approval process and made it less cumbersome. Though that's not an issue in my view, but scientists have to really bring the varieties which are climate resilient for approval in the first place. Water management. As I said, my expertise has been in water management. Having talked about so many negative aspects, let me say that one good thing that has happened in Pakistan over the last 15, 20 years is very wide adaptation of laser leveling in Pakistan. You go to heart of Punjab or Sindh, you will see majority of the farmers practicing laser land leveling, and that has really helped with water saving. But lot more work needs to be done. And I think you clearly mentioned, and I have seen that study from PCRWR. In fact, that study says Pakistani rice farmers apply 60% more water to rice than is required. In fact, now there are regenerative agriculture techniques, which I also tried to promote 2 years ago, but for lack of funding, we didn't have the tools and machinery to help farmers raise crops on beds, raised beds, which can save water up to 50%. So for want of resources, Pakistan cannot really take advantage of these technologies. And speaking of farmers adopting these technologies, it would require very specific and very sophisticated farm machinery, which is really not there. And we need financing for it. My real concern is that in forums like this, we talk about very fancy technologies, like our young presenter talked about hydroponics. My problem with these technologies is these are highly capital intensive, first of all, not even 0.1% farmers can adopt and afford it and adopt it. And number two, honestly, as an economist, I've been asking questions. Somebody has to show me first, what exactly is its financial feasibility? So, Osama, I need to speak to you after the session, but in your presentation, I expected you to tell us who has practiced this technology and established the proof of concept that having spent so much money setting up these production systems, they are in fact making money. I think we also talked about the issues the agriculture is already facing. So my concern with Pakistan's agriculture is that even before climate change came about 10 odd years ago, and the last 5 years really showed us what it can do to our agriculture, we were struggling to practice even the agriculture under normal circumstances. The yield gaps between the progressive farmer and the average farmer is 30 to 40%. And we have estimated in the ministry that if Pakistani farmers, even given the technologies we have, same seed, same amount of water, same soils, if farmers are able to perform nearly as good as progressive farmers in the same village, in the same province, Pakistan's agriculture would be generating $15 billion worth of more crops. And that's the gap even with the current level of technologies, let alone when the climate change is going to come knocking at the door. So the challenge really in Pakistan is to put some practical ideas on the table. The agriculture, I say every forum I go to, is a classic public good. In the US, in Japan, in China, India, elsewhere in between, and in Pakistan. So it takes government efforts to make technologies available for farmers. And I'm not talking about subsidies. Somebody mentioned here, farmers should be offered subsidies. No, what farmers need is appropriate technology and government's policies to stabilize prices. Agriculture markets don't work. Somebody mentioned IMF, and which has now tried to make Pakistan have completely deregulated agriculture markets. We really need to understand what government's role is, and there's a huge gap, what government ought to do, even without providing subsidies, through smart policies. And there's a huge gap. And I think what I want to leave you with is, please advise us, advise the government that how Pakistan can take advantage of climate financing, which is available, which Pakistan deserves, because loss in Pakistan is not our own doing. Two, what are practical technologies which farmers can adopt? And three, what policies government can adopt to help farmers latch onto those technologies? So with these, not too many positive thoughts, but maybe thought-provoking points. My view always is, in public policy, we need to have honest conversation. And that's how I advise the government when I get the opportunity, and that's what I share with my colleagues when I get a chance. So thank you very much once again. I appreciate SDPI giving me a chance to come here and share my thoughts with you. Very good, Alan.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much, Dr. Akmal Sadiq. Indeed, your concluding remarks were quite honest. And as we know that honesty is the best policy. And with this, I have An announcement, as Arjun is also with us, and we have Qasim Saab from SDPI. With the support from IDRC, SDPI is launching a study to introduce innovative policy tools, including fiscal and trade policies, with the aim to enhance food security in Pakistan. This initiative is part of a broader effort to improve food availability, accessibility, and sustainability. Through these non-traditional policy approaches, SDPI aims to address critical food challenges and create a resilient framework for Pakistan's food system. Qasim Saab, do you want to add? Okay. Thank you so much to our audience, and my colleague Hassan and Mubin, they have distributed vouchers. You guys may enjoy your lunch, and may I request our panelist, our team, and I just want to say thanks to Emily for being such an easygoing collaborator. Thank you so much. And may I request our team to join us on stage for group photo. And we have a professor from Namal University, sir, you are requested to join us as well. Our GAIN partners, Ms. Farah and Mr. Faiz, SDPI team, Hassan, Rabia, Dua, Mubin, please join us on stage.